to bridge the division between academic worlds and other worlds. So I figured in a panel on poetry, it would be good to have a poet speak. So I am happy to introduce Jorge Antonio Vallejos, who is a Toronto-based poet, essayist, and journalist identifying as mixed race. His writing has appeared in the Kenyan Review, Descant, Yellow Medicine Review, Color Lines, racialicious.com, and other publications. He is the creator of, lead writer, and vlogger at blackcoffeepoet.com and the Black Coffee Poet YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to both. He can be reached at blackcoffeepoet@gmail.com. I'd recommend checking it out. It's really an excellent and very well read video blog. So some of you I had sent around something about being taped for the blog, and there was just a little bit too much red tape and issues with the ACLA, so Jorge is just going to tape his own presentation and leave it at that. So we are going to hear Chrystos, Her Words Not Vanishing.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here at ACLA 2013. Again, I'm not an academic. I'm a poet, essayist, and journalist. This is a work in progress. It's a memoir piece. Chrystos is my favorite poet, as you can tell. Anyways, what I have to give you is a trigger warning. Chrystos talks about a lot of stuff, in particular violence against women. So a trigger warning is that there will be stuff about violence against women talked about in this paper. I have to let you know that, and you can decide whether you want to stay or not. So thank you for coming, and I'd love to hear your feedback after. There's going to be 4 poems discussed in this memoir. The names are here, the page numbers are here, and I'm going to pass around the book so you can look at it. The working title is On Reading Chrystos, Her Words Are Not Vanishing. "Save me, Joe Louis, save me, Joe Louis," said 19-year-old black inmate Alan Foster while chained to the chair of a 1930s southern U.S. prison gas chamber. The pull of a string by the executioner, followed by falling pellets of potassium cyanide, let out a white and gray acidic smoke covering the young man. The last thought to enter his mind wasn't family, friends, or God. It was a black icon, a role model, a boxing hero. So the story goes. But there is a reality. Most of us men of color no longer have such peoples in their lives. Today, our Joe Louises and Muhammad Alis are stars who often degrade women, sometimes promoting rape, like the recent controversy over lyrics by rapper Rick Ross. And here they are. Molly means a date rape drug. Put Molly all in her champagne. She ain't even know it. I took her home and I enjoyed that. She ain't even know it. We live in a culture of rape. While writing this memoir piece, 2 young football players from Steubenville, Ohio, were shown crying on TV after being convicted for raping a 16-year-old girl and broadcasting it on YouTube and Twitter. A 14-year-old girl was raped on a bus in Scotland a week after the Steubenville, Ohio verdict, followed by 2 fifth graders arrested for planning the rape and murder of a female classmate in Fort Kovo, Washington. We live in a culture of rape. Late last year, 23-year-old Jyoti Singh Pandey was raped on a bus in New Delhi, India, by 6 men and left for dead on the side of the road in broad daylight. When first thinking this essay up 4 years ago, 20 Latino and Mestizo boys raped a girl outside of a high school dance in Richmond, California. Texts were sent around as the assault happened, inviting people to join in and watch the 2.5-hour assault. We live in a culture of rape. Joe Louis did not save the young man chained in the gas chamber in the early 1900s. His legacy of hard work, honesty, and humility hasn't saved the men in Ohio, Scotland, Washington, New Delhi, or California in the new millennium. Who is saving men of color from rape culture? Can we be saved from rape culture? Are we to be saved from rape culture? Are we to save ourselves from rape culture? The journey of growing up a brown man is a difficult one. You enter early manhood and have to act hypermasculine. You are told and taught that to be a man is to follow patriarchy. Man knows all. Man is always right. Man does what man wants. Man gets what man wants. Man always wins. Hypermasculinity and patriarchy, both being after effects of colonization, are our potassium cyanide. The reinforcement of such ideologies in homes, schools, religious institutions, and larger society are our white and gray acidic smoke surrounding us. We men of color are dying spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically. But there is hope. We don't have to look to other men and supposed true masculinity to be men, to be better human beings. It has been different women of color who have set I, this brown man, on track. One special woman is Menominee poet Chrystos, author of the book Not Vanishing. In her dedication, she states, "This book is for all Native women." Little did she know how much she would impact me, a mixed-race indigenous man, how she would mold a brown man like a clay pot, how she would sow seeds into his mind and later have her words blossom, further emanating a scent from his mouth to the noses of other brown men, tattooing their psyches with poems of resistance as opposed to verbal cyanide. Chrystos came into my life via a recommended reading list in a magazine I used to read and later write for, Redwire. I am not sure what number she was listed in that top 10. I'll say number 1. The book's red cover caught my attention like a jab, but the title was the shot that stayed and continues to stay, Not Vanishing. At the end of her intros, Chrystos says, "We are not vanishing Americans." Published in 1988 by Press Gang, a now defunct publishing house, you see that Chrystos was right. Today, the highest birth rate in the land now known as Canada is Native peoples. And across the Americas, originally known as Abya Yala, meaning land in its full maturity, indigenous peoples are rising in many ways. In her poem Savage Eloquence, Chrystos writes, "They mean to kill us, all. Vanishing is no joke, vanishing is no metaphor." Whether it be hangings, rape, biological warfare via smallpox blankets, eugenics via vaccines from the government, or boarding and residential schools meant to kill the Indian and save the child, Chrystos is here. Her people are here. Indigenous peoples are here. More importantly, Chrystos' words are carrying on without a literary agent, without a publisher, without being stolen by Google Books. Words are power. Words transform. Words are seeds for growth. Words bring change. Before Chrystos came into my life, I used to say, "I hate poetry." It was my experience in high school reading dead white men whose poems I did not understand that turned me off. With Chrystos, I could relate to her words. She talked about women of color, queer peoples, indigeneity, colonialism, appropriation of culture, disability. Her poems are written teachings accompanying the oral wisdom I received at the sweat lodge with other indigenous men every full moon. In particular, respecting and being an ally to women. As I released beads of toxicity in the sweat lodge, the womb of Mother Earth, words of medicine entered my ears. With Chrystos' poems, all the pain I let out every full moon was replaced by a visual stamp on my brain. As a former crack dealer and car thief who wore gloves while driving, and when filling up plastic bags with rock cocaine, the first poem that caught my eye was, "There is a man without fingerprints." The first line continues from the title, "Who tortures, rapes, murders." Immediately, Chrystos takes you to the core of the poem and much of the core of her work, violence against women. Like a police report, she writes all the killer does, where he does it, when, and how. She challenges those who are there to serve and protect by unaffectionately calling them pigs and writing the common truth of, "The police are keeping him under wraps. They say they don't want us to panic." Much of what makes Chrystos' writing strong is that she makes herself vulnerable via showing the vulnerability of those who share her gender. At the same time, she challenges the reader, in this case me, via the lines, "He knew the habits of women he killed, watching us from coffee shop windows in cool sips." As a drug dealer, I always was aware of my surroundings. Who lived where, who drove what car, who was new to the hood, who was an undercover, who was a user. Today, as a writer who sits at coffee shop windows, my vigilance has continued, this time having me relate to Chrystos' words even when no longer involved in a violent lifestyle. When my pen hits a pad or fingers hit my keyboard, I see, mentally record, and know everyone's habits, their comings and goings. Again, I am reminded of Christos' work and our collective vulnerability. And I wonder who and how many are the men without fingerprints. Christos' poem truthfully ends with, "This is not a poem, it's a newspaper, a warning written quickly. Always be on guard, ready to kill, to survive. He has no face. He could be any man watching you." We live in a culture of rape. The second poem that has been a large influence in my personhood and art is No More Metaphors. As with all Christos' work, she does not pull punches. To be more clear, if every line were a punch, they would all be meant to break the reader down and eventually knock the reader out. Christos, no pun intended, is not out to score points. Dedicated to the Green River victims, over 90 female sex workers murdered by Gary Ridgway in Washington state during the 1980s and 1990s, No More Metaphors is about sex work by Christos, a former sex worker herself. A bleak poem about street walking workers, Christos talks of realities and tragedies that come with the job. Hatred, fists, perverse desires, disease. There is a violence that comes with the job, and it's not only from clients or police. Christos uses repetition to reinforce her point, further beating the story, the lesson, into the reader. To be a sex worker is, as Christos says, to wear a bruise where the heart beats, to be a tunnel for the spit of men, to be a hole for the hatred of women. It is a one-sided view that holds the self, society, the client, and for the most part in this case, the same gender accountable for the different forms of violence that come with the job. The second half of the poem addresses the killer, Gary Ridgway, and all killers of sex workers, who are a class that are not second or third, but rather disposable, erased, and forgotten. Hence why men like Ridgway can kill 90 people, take 90 lives, 90 mothers, sisters, and daughters. Christos writes, "To be a murderer of prostitutes is to be free." Images of jail with beds, clothing, food, and warmth are written. Still, as mentioned earlier, the poem is one-sided. Its first effect on me was a bringing out of empathy. With more knowledge, I began to see how Christos saw things all negative for workers in the trade. Not all sex workers would agree with the stance of the poem. Still, the images cannot be denied, as cannot Christos' take on the job, since it is her lived experience. She had sold services for years via different means and in different circumstances. What the poem did was prompt me to join a coalition to help street-walking sex workers be safe. The Bad Date Coalition. It also prompted me to write a poem after hearing about a bad date in a meeting. In 2009, two men in a white van were kidnapping street-walking sex workers around Toronto's downtown east side and raping them outside of town. This specific strip is known as low track because the sex workers are the most vulnerable due to addiction and therefore they charge the cheapest rates in town. After hearing about this bad date, I was sickened. Images of punches, cigarette burns, needles forced in arms, cornfields, and a shovel were roaming my head. As a poet who often says, "My activism is my writing," I had only one choice of what I could do besides being part of the coalition. That is, to write. After consulting current and former sex workers and getting the okay, I put pen to pad and wrote White Van. Based on the true event, my poem White Van ends with the sex worker narrowly escaping her attackers after surviving hours of sexual assaults. I write, "Stalks of corn hide the assault, the hours of misery, the trauma for life. The final words, I forgot the shovel. Middle-aged man and his right hand walk back to White Van. It's do or die, her one chance to scram. Running, hiding, laying with sister corn, bleeding on Mother Earth, crying on her, nails digging in her, holding on till dawn, staying put long after white van is gone. Thumbing her way back home from small town Ontario, it's over, this sad reality that's always been a scary scenario. Stitched up, bruised, burned, scarred, more reminders of a life and job that's always hard. White van, two man, all man, when the fuck we gonna change, man? We live in a culture of rape. In the brothel called America is a poem running along the same theme as No More Metaphors and the overall theme of the collection as mentioned earlier in this essay. Words commemorating a friend, a sister, who is addicted to coke are descriptions of someone who is walking dead. The poem's title suggests that everyone is selling themselves somehow, some way, to reach the American dream, the lie of manifest destiny. Many fail, and many are at rock bottom. No judgment in this lake of fire, writes Chrystos of her addicted friend, who she describes as being on a journey of defeat. Only a few can win at this game set up for the ultra-privileged. With all the sadness, Chrystos does not lose hope. In this rape culture, Chrystos survives violation after violation to hold a new view. Pray for her is repeated throughout the poem and at the end of every stanza. Pray for her to survive the brothel, the lake of fire, this dark drowning in white. White being coke, capitalism, Christianity, racism, colonialism. Christos writes, pray for her. Let our voices lead her to another way. Pray with all our spirits. Lead her stumbling, bruised, ashamed, away from this dark drowning in white. Stars give her strength. Sun turn her eyes. Moon guide her feet. Earth turning, hold her. We pray for her. We sing for her. We drum for her. We pray. This is an essay. This is a poem. This is a call to end this culture of rape. We don't pray to him, whether it be Joe Louis or a spirit that has been given a gender in this phallic-centered and dominated world. We pray for him in Ohio, New Delhi, Scotland, anywhere, any man watching. We pray for him to stop living in toxicity. We pray for him to stop living in ways that hide fingerprints. We pray for him to stop living a savage eloquence. We pray for him to stop living lies and metaphor. We pray for him to stop loving the brothel called America. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jorge. So we have one more paper for this